cyber tools by threat actors to interfere in democratic institutions and to undertake espionage campaigns against political parties and parliamentarians. Dans son rapport spécial,
In its special report, the NCCOP mentioned that a cyber actor led by the State of the People's Republic of China had unsuccessfully targeted members of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Now, by way of conclusion,
the incident in question was handled in 2021. However, I can say that the Government of Canada is very focused on how to best inform parliamentarians of national security threats. Dans une société démocratique, la lutte.
In a democratic society, combating threats to national security requires informed, non-partisan public debate between government and the public, as well as with parliamentarians. This type of debate that we're holding this morning is very important because it helps us to better understand the threats which we face as a country. And it also helps us to strengthen our ability to respond to these threats as part of a whole of society approach. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to stop here, and myself and my colleague are available to answer questions from the committee. Thank you very much, Madame Drouin.
To our first line of questioning, Mr. Genis, the floor will be yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Xavier, we had 3 rounds of questioning previously. I'm going to follow up on some of those questions because I reread our exchanges and there were some things I noticed that I wanted to probe a little bit more. First off, in my 3rd round, I had asked about caveats in terms of information that was shared with the House of Commons. I think you had said you had to get back to us. I assume you have that information now. Were there any caveats in the information shared with the House of Commons in terms of limitations on who they could then share that information with, et cetera?
So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So when we share information with anybody, especially when it's pieces of intelligence...
Just a very specific question. Were there caveats in this case?
It is very possible that there would be caveats. In terms of the briefings, because we held many briefings with the House of Commons, it is very possible that some of the documentation with...
Ma'am, I asked you this question previously. I wasn't asking if it was possible. I asked if there were caveats.
So because, Mr. Chair, I wasn't in the meetings myself, I don't know exactly which documents were shared with the House of Commons. But I would expect that some of the documents that we did share with the House of Commons would have had caveats, especially based on classification.
Okay.
Having said
would those
that,
have limited their ability to share information with others?
So, Mr. Chair, it is possible that had there been caveats on the documentations provided, that those caveats would only be able to be shared with people with similar classification.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying it's possible, but you're not willing or ready to confirm?
Mr. Genis, just
Rappel au règlement.
So, point of order, please. Over to you, Madame Gaudreau. Now, I just have access to French interpretation, and when the interpreter says inaudible, then clearly I think that my colleague is perhaps talking too fast. Yes, I quite understand, is the response from the chair.
Mr. Genis, just in terms of allowing the witness the opportunity to respond, I will be generous with the time. We've gained a little bit of time throughout the course of the meeting. So if the concern is about rushing, don't worry. The quality of the question and answer is more important. Madame Xavier, if you can do your best to speak more slowly. Mr. Genis, if you can do your best to speak more slowly and also to try to ensure that we're not speaking over one another.
Alors, rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président, quelle était la question?
Point of order, what was the question? That's the information that's missing for me. The quality of the question, which question? The question from Mr. Genis. That's what I didn't receive. Okay.
Seems that Madame Gaudreau did not hear it. So I've stopped the clock. If you could repeat your previous question. Madame Gaudreau, s'il y a des enjeux qui continuent.
If there's any other issue, please let me know, Madame Gaudreau.
Okay. If you could just repeat the question, though, because I think there seemed to have been a translation.
Sure, okay. Let me know when you're starting the time. But to summarize the round, if there were translation problems so far, I have asked if there were caveats that limited the House of Commons from sharing information with parliamentarians. And the response we're getting is it's possible that there could have been without confirmation that there was.
Okay, so I am now going to start the clock.
Okay, thank you. And we can make this easier for ourselves and for interpreters just with clear questions, clear answers. Are you prepared to tell us whether or not there were caveats? Not whether it was possible that there were caveats, but whether there were. And if you're not, is it because you don't know or because you don't wish to share that information?
Mr. Chair, I can assure you it's not because I don't wish to share the information, but it is because I wasn't personally present at the time of when we were having some of these exchanges with this House of Commons IT security
team. That's good enough. Will you, I did ask this question previously, and I was told you could get back to us, and you're back, and you still aren't able to answer. Would you undertake to provide a response to this committee in writing, specifically regarding caveats, within 2 weeks?
So, Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to be able to answer the question in writing, and we are waiting for the official taskings out of the last time I was present at PROC to be able to answer all of the other questions that were also asked of us.
Within 2 weeks?
I suspect we should be able to do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I had asked you a series of questions in my first round about what you communicated with the House of Commons, and you had and I noticed something afterwards when I was reviewing this. I had asked if you informed House administration about the source of the attack. And you said that you had informed them about, quote, what we believed at the time to be the originating source of the attack. And then I asked you in follow-up, so you shared with the House of Commons administration the source of the attack, that being APT 31. And then your response changed. You suggested we go in camera, and then you variously dodged the follow-ups. And at no point did you confirm that APT 31 was identified to House of Commons administration as the threat. So I want to press that point because I noticed that you didn't answer about APT 31 specifically. Did you, at any point, inform House of Commons administration that APT 31 specifically was the source of the attack?
So, Mr. Chair, when we started the conversation with the House of Commons, it was in 2021. And at that time, it is very possible that we were not calling this actor APT 31. So what we were sharing with the House of Commons was what we were at that time understanding to be the originating actions and the threat actor, which we now have come to know as APT 31. What I cannot confirm and guarantee, Mr. Chair, is that at that time we were calling it APT 31.
So at what point in time did you mention APT 31 specifically to House of Commons administration? Not in 2021, it sounds like, but at some point in the future, or never?
What I'm understanding is that we did eventually come to confirm to the House of Commons that this actor was APT 31. What I'm saying is that originally, when we started to understand the actor, we may not have called it APT 31.
But just when did you identify the actor to the House?
My understanding is that based on the exchanges that we've had with the House of Commons and the presentations that we made collectively with CSIS, it might have been around February of 2021 that we then may have alluded to that being the possible actor by that name.
So you did, or you think you might have named APT 31 in February of 2021?
So in the presentations that were done by ourselves and CSIS,
I'm almost out of time. Just yes or no.
There were a series of documents that were shared with the IT team, and one of those documents outlines that the actor could be APT 31.
It could have been. Okay. So this is the problem we have with the government's narrative is they said House of Commons IT was told, and they were supposed to tell MPs, but you said there may have been caveats, and you can't confirm whether there were or not, but there may have been caveats, and you can't confirm whether the House of Commons was even told that APT 31 was the source of the threat. So how in the world could House of Commons IT have informed members of Parliament if there were caveats and if they weren't informed who the source of the actor was? And we've had you here twice. We've asked you specific questions about that information being passed along, and you haven't been able to answer. You've told us there might have been caveats, that the information might have been shared, it might not have been shared, it might have been in a document. You're not sure which document, and you're not precisely sure of the timeline. Do you see how this completely blows up the government's claim that the House of Commons IT was properly informed?
Mr. Jennings, if there is a question, I will afford Ms. Xavier a moment. But
I think the point is clear, but I'd welcome a response if there is one.
Ms. Xavier, very quickly, if you'd like to respond.
So, Mr. Chair, what I've made clear and what I'm trying to emphasize is that when you're dealing with cyber incidents, at the beginning, you may not know all the details. And so eventually, as you continue to have the back and forth conversation with the service provider, you come more clarity comes to be, especially when there's exchanges of the logs. And at the time, we may not have originally known it was APT 31, but in the exchange of information that we had with the House of Commons, there was sufficient information provided for them to know what the issue was that was at risk, what the what actions they needed to take to
The
mitigate.
FBI told you, though.
No,
It was
Mr.
the
Janice,
FBI said who it was. You had this information because the
Mr.
FBI
Janice,
gave it to you, and you didn't pass it along.
Colleagues, I would very much appreciate if the chair's role in facilitating a meeting was respected. I have done my best throughout the course of the last hour and the beginning of this hour to be very generous in affording members the opportunity to ask questions and witnesses the opportunity to respond to those questions. I'm going to be less generous if I feel as though that's being taken advantage of. I appreciate your cooperation in that matter. I'm going to turn the floor over now to Ms. Romanato for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us. My first question will be to Madame Drouin. First of all, welcome to the role of NSIA. I don't think you've been to PROC since you started in this role. Can you confirm with us, in your role as the National Security Intelligence Advisor, do you have a mandate that would include informing members of Parliament or parliamentarians of an active threat?
Thank you for this question. One thing that I would like to, that we all kind of looked at is the ways in which we are dealing with threat in 2024 is quite different from the ways in which we were dealing with that in the past. And that is good. That is good that we continue to involve and enhance our processes, and we need to continue to do that. With the new directive that was adopted last year in terms of sharing with parliamentarians the threats we are facing, it is much clearer now that handling a situation like the one we're talking about will trigger a conversation with implicated MPs. One thing, though, that I would like to say, and I'm not an expert when it comes to CSC work, but when they see a cyber threat, the first thing they need to do is to stop the bleeding. That's the first thing. Like, we want to make sure that the actor doesn't have access to data, and that if information have been infiltrated, that we can recuperate those information. So the first focus is really to stop the threat. After that,
I don't want to cut you off. It's just that I do have quite a few questions. So I understand that when there is an immediate threat vis-a-vis our systems, that the goal is to stop the bleeding, as you said. However, in the case that we're studying right now with respect to members of Parliament, parliamentarians who were targeted, I understand that this was in 2021. You were not in the role at that time. But you mentioned that once, I guess, the bleeding has been stopped, that there is a new ministerial directive to the CSIS to advise members of Parliament. You also mentioned in your opening statement that on June 3rd, Foreign Affairs, National Defense, and Public Safety issued a cyber threat bulletin warning Canadians. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just going to ask you, were parliamentarians provided that cyber threat bulletin?
I will turn to my colleague for that.
So thank you for the question. So all bulletins that are issued in a public manner, and they're put on websites, and we amplify any publication with other means through social media, circulating it to service providers, and various ways. So the publication itself wasn't directed only for a certain number of people. On the contrary, we want to make sure that they're as public as possible so they could be useful to whoever could find them useful.
So on that, Madame Xavier, I never received it. So I understand you're saying you put it out on social media on the website, but you understand we ourselves have said to you and to various people that we are targets. You've mentioned we are targets given the work that we do. And yet parliamentarians did not receive that cyber threat bulletin that may or may not have a specific target to us, but we were not made aware of it either. So what I'm trying to get to is that we are trying to improve the communications to parliamentarians whenever there is an active threat, whether it be directly to them or to be on the lookout. And that seems to be there's still a gap. I still don't, it's not clear to me who is responsible for letting members of parliament and senators know about a cyber threat? Can someone, because when CSIS was here, they said it wasn't them. When IT was here, they said it wasn't them. When you were here last, it wasn't you. So whose job is it to notify members of parliament?
So, you for this question. So maybe let me say one thing. Not all cyber attack are personal attack to MPs. So that, like, we should not make an equation that all cyber attack means that a specific MP was targeting. Sometimes it's completely random. And then it is more for the administrator of the system and the network to make sure that they have the appropriate mechanism to stop the threat. When it comes to threat to specific MPs, as I said, the directive that was adopted last year will come into play and will trigger specific briefings to MPs. We also coordinate with the House and the Senate when it comes to briefings to parliamentarians. You may be aware that such a briefing in terms of the threat that MPs may face have begun, and some of them happened last week. And maybe my colleague Caroline can talk about the several briefings that you have done over the past years to parliamentarians.
So actually, I only have 5 seconds, so I'm very well over the report that was tabled in the House on the number of parliamentarians who have been briefed, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Romanato. Madame Gaudreau, à vous pour 6 minutes.
You now have 6 minutes, Madame Gaudreau. Thank you very much. So we see each other again, and it's the first time for you, Madame Drouin, but we've seen you over the last 2 weeks. And I hadn't really seen the difference between what happened in public and what happened in camera, because we put very specific questions to you. And I personally was hoping to have specific answers, namely, basically, for this committee to become a type of examining committee. And you have seen that our parliamentary colleagues have explained to us that it's thanks to the FBI, it was thanks to them that we knew about this. I thought, wow, and how do you actually ascertain this? And imagine I'm kind of flabbergasted here. I've come across a document that was published on the 15th of December. I even provided it to all of my colleagues because I said to them, look, it's the National Security Agency for IT Systems, and publicly, there it is. It refers to ATP 31, the vectors, the infection chain, the methods of invasion, and all of the different techniques and all the different tactics are in there. And I'd like to be reassured by you. I thought you'd said, yes, we're going to correct course, we're going to keep you informed, I'm going to guide you. But when I came across this, when I stumbled across this, I thought, is there some will deliberately to not inform us, or is there some sort of protocol out there whereby we have to wait for things to get worse before something happens? I need to understand about all this because it's very worrisome. Mr. Chair, thank you for that question and the comment. Yes, in fact, this publication to which you've referred, it's something that we published in partnership with that agency, and it's because we recognize that ATP 31 can be quite a persistent, solid actor, and we're not immune to that. Here in Canada, we want to be aware of the fact that this exists, just to specify that this is a document from France. It doesn't come from the CSE. Yes, it wasn't from us. You're quite right. But we do work closely with other partners to be aware of other publications that come out to diffuse these further. We work with partners, and we realize we are not the only ones coming out with reports. So that's why we form these partnerships. And when this type of publication comes up, we want to try and diffuse it further. Having said that, I'd like to reassure you we take very seriously the comments in this committee and the reports that are pursued here, and we will look at the recommendations very closely to improve things. And I'd also like to add that since the conversations that we had the last time I was here, we've had several meetings with the House of Commons to continue to improve the way in which we can work more closely with them, and in particular so that we are able to better serve you. Madame Goudreau, well, we could do things the other way around, couldn't we? First of all, we could give you the elements from our daily life, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes people say, okay, it comes from the private email, but we don't have much of a private life. So perhaps individuals who are drawing up strategies, just like when I say I want to be your client, because otherwise if I don't put up my hand, it seems that people are always saying it's not me, and it seems that nobody's really dealing with this. And I do understand that there's a protocol that's going to be developed, but I'd like to have your opinion on this, because CSIS mentioned to us that there is a type of monitoring committee. It's a cross-partisan committee with each of the teams in the CSE and the CSIS and others perhaps, so that they can monitor the situation. I think Australia already has that type of process in place. So I'd like to hear more about this, because things are going too fast elsewhere, and it seems that we can't keep a pace with everything that's happening at such a rapid pace. Sorry, Chair, I'm not very sure about this question. Okay, I'll repeat it. Can you perhaps stop the clock for me, please? I'll try and be brief. So what do you think about the setting up of a committee such as the one that's been set up by the Australian government to actually constantly monitor what's happening together with various collaboration partners, namely the government or Five Eyes partners, because we don't have that at the moment. Do you agree with that idea? Chair, I very much agree with anything that could continue to really beef up our cyber resilience. And as has been mentioned by the member, we would pursue any avenue that's useful. So we'll base ourselves on the recommendations that we receive, and we'll follow this up with our Australian colleagues, because they have learned a great deal, because this particular actor has had an impact on their parliament as well. So these are definitely things that can be examined and possibly set up. Well, that's excellent. Something that also really surprised me. Sorry, Madame Goudreau, you've just got 15 seconds left. Okay, well, I'll use that under my 2 minutes 30. Yes, I'll add those 20 seconds to your 2 minutes 30 later. Thank you.
The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here today as well. You know, what is clear through this whole situation is that there has been major gaps in government action in informing members of parliament, whether it be in the case of MP Michael Chong, who's being targeted, that require for a leak to provide that information, or in this instance, through a cyber attack of parliamentarians, that it actually came from another source from the FBI for them to be informed. So what's clear is that this is a not a one-off by way of miscommunication or poor communication, but rather is a systemic issue. That's the way I see it. Over and over again, we are learning important information where members of parliament, parliamentarians should be informed, and we're not. And in this instance, with the cyber attacks, as was indicated, we have different agencies that's come before this committee, and everyone else was pointing a finger to someone else to say that they're responsible. And that has to be not acceptable. I hope that the government will accept that. So maybe my first question is, does the government accept responsibility? What's happened in this pattern of behavior is simply not acceptable.
What I think that together we need to is, first of all, take foreign interference very seriously, cyber threat also We are all learning together. I said it in my opening remarks. I think that if something like that happened today, it will be handled differently based on our collective experience, based on the ministerial directive. So yes, and I think that we shouldn't forget that the treater here is not us or is not you, like it's really the foreign actors. And together we need to be stronger in order to respond appropriately to the foreign actors. So yes, we are taking those lessons. Yes, we can improve the system. We can handle things differently, but we all need to do that in order to be stronger in front of those hostile state actors.
Well, the question then is, how will things be done differently? The truth of the matter is, I don't believe that the government has taken foreign interference activities very seriously, at least not until this moment. And in fact, we heard through the commissioner in the inquiry that Canada is actually way behind the 8 ball through the witnesses at the inquiry. Canada is way behind the 8 ball in comparison to our allied countries. Everyone else is miles ahead of us, and we're only just starting to wake up to it. So I guess the question is this: when can parliamentarians receive documentation on how the government intends to proceed if lessons are indeed learned in going forward? And will there be adjustments, for example, with intelligence that's come through? Because there are instances where I think there is an overreach in protective of information because of the notion of national security. When will that be adjusted? And then the third question related to this is this: even within the government's very many departments and different setups and agencies in looking into this matter, there is actually not a coherent process coming out of that. And we learned, for example, the site task force did not inform Elections Canada in real time when they have information that a particular candidate is maybe subject to foreign interference activities, and they were not informed of that in real time. And even when a complaint was made, that information was still not shared with Elections Canada. How is this possible, and what will be done to address this litany of mistakes, and when will the government undertake an approach that actually connects the dots with all these activities to create a coherent picture?
Let me start with something you have just done as parliamentarians. You have just adopted C-70. C-70 will give us new tools to address new realities. And for example, being able to talk about foreign interference with other level of government, the private sector, academics. So just that is a new tool that is very important. Through the Commission, we have also worked very hard in terms of trying to sanitize and do summary when it comes to foreign intelligence documents. This is a new reality for us. We haven't done that before, and that was in order to make those documents more accessible and transparent. Other countries, yes, it's true, are doing declassification. We've heard many times U.S. Talking about the fact that they have declassified information before the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So we can also learn from that and do that differently in a more regular manner. The flow of information...
Just in a few seconds to wrap up, please.
So the flow of information, we have talked about it. You saw that. It is something that the system has started to address. My predecessor has done tremendous work regarding that, and I'm continuing because it's true that trying to find who saw what when, it is something very important for all of us.
Thank you very much. Just before we go back to the Conservatives for the next question, Madame Gaudreau, je comprends que vous doit...
Madame Gaudreau, I understand that you have to leave us for a special celebration in a few moments, so I'd like to thank you for your contributions over the last few months, and I hope that you have a great summer. So thank you very much, and congratulations to your family. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and all the best of our colleagues. Thank you. So now we'll give the floor to you in a few moments.
Is yours for 5 minutes.
Madame Drouin, I want to follow up on some of the statements you've made today that have frankly not been true at all. You'd said that, quote, on the inquiry, quote, nothing has been withheld, and then later said in an exchange that the Commission, they have everything they've asked for. That's not true. If that were the case, why did the legal counsel for Madame Justice Hogue to our committee only within the last couple of weeks say, quote, discussions between the Commission and the government on the issue of disclosure of cabinet confidences are ongoing? And for
point of order,
sorry,
Mr. Chair.
where is that coming from?
Sorry,
Oh,
it's
Sherry,
me.
sorry. I'm hearing. I thought I was hearing voices. Ms. Romanato.
My apologies. I'm just kind of confused. I don't know if Mr. Duncan knows that we're not on the same study. We're on the study about the cyber attacks.
It is a fair reminder. And Mr. Duncan, let's finish the line of questioning. But it is a fair reminder that we are here more specifically on the cyber attacks. But finish the line of questioning. Let's see where it goes. Madame Drouin, you'll have a moment to answer that question.
Where I'm going with this is the pattern of cover-ups that have been happening time and time again on this issue. So my question is, I've mentioned about the letter from the legal counsel. If, quote, everything they've been asked for, they've got, why are they still going through a legal process with you to get the documents that they deem relevant and what they want to have?
Monsieur le Président, je peux répondre à cette question. Je vais essayer.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that question. I'll try and be brief.
I'd like us to be clear. We are putting everything in the same basket, talking about information. So there's different type of information. What I have said is that all intelligence information, relevant and classified information, heavily classified information, relevant to the mandate of the Commission, everything has been shared with the Commission without exercising any kind of privileges. And then the other part of your question are more related to potentially memorandum to cabinet. And this is why I also shared with you that the most to-the-point documents, the 4 most relevant documents were shared with the Commission, and the ongoing conversation is about potentially other memorandum to cabinet that accessory may have talked about.
And here's the problem, Madame Drouin, because it's the most relevant deemed by you, deemed by the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, and the Privy Council office, making that determination of what is relevant. The terms of reference that were set says, quote, it authorizes the Commissioner to receive and review any relevant classified or unclassified documents. And here's the thing for Canadians watching this and what is happening. This is like a courtroom trial where the accused that's on the stand gets to choose what evidence the judge gets to see. The reason this inquiry is going on and the reason there's been so much scrutiny is the action, or frankly, the lack of action on combating foreign interference from the Prime Minister, the PMO, and the PCO. So will you explain to Canadians why the very groups I just mentioned, including yourself, under scrutiny, get to select what evidence the justice gets to see? Why don't you provide everything, not that you deem relevant, but that she deems relevant?
I like the comparison with the litigation. As you know, I've been managed a lot of litigations and a lot of e-discoveries in my life, and this is how it works. We do proceed in terms of collecting, based on the questions we are receiving, all the materials, and then we disclose to the court. Like this assessment, and this is based on good faith, and there are consequences if we are not acting in good faith and trying to hide things. But this is at core of the process.
And I will just argue there's consequences when Canadians look at this and see that documents are not being provided as requested by the justice leading this. And so we talk about consequences. It's the integrity of this commission and having Madame Justice Hogue feeling like she has everything she needs to be able to do a proper investigation. Clearly, when lawyers and legal counsel are meeting back and forth, they're clearly not happy. I'm going to pass the remainder of my time over to Mr. Cooper.
Just one moment, Mr. Cooper. I will stop the clock. Madame Drouin, I will offer you a brief opportunity to respond.
I just want to say that we will all benefit from the work of the Commission and its recommendation. It's not on the advantage of any of us to withhold information in order for her to be relevant in her conclusions. Listen to her. And then, of course, we do have a responsibility as civil servant to strike the right balance in protecting, which is really important for you in terms of the cabinet confidence and making sure that she can do her job. But we all want her to succeed because we want Canada to succeed.
Thank you very much, Madame Drouin. Mr. Cooper, I'm going to restart the clock. There are 45 seconds remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will move a motion that I had put on notice, and I'll read it, that given the large workload the committee is managing, the committee instructs the chair to schedule 5 meetings between July 8th, 2024 and September 13th, 2024 to address the report of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians titled Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's Democratic Processes and Institutions, tabled in Parliament on June 3rd, 2024, and to continue the committee's ongoing work on foreign election interference. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will make very brief remarks. This committee has a lot of work that is outstanding. That includes Bill C-65, which has passed second reading and that is going to be referred to our committee. It's a bit legislation, government legislation that takes priority. We have Scott Reed's motion, as well as Alex Ruff's private members bill. We continue our work on this study with respect to the question of privilege arising from the cyber attack directed against 18 parliamentarians, and we are continuing work with respect to the broader issue of foreign interference, and there are a number of issues that have arisen coming out of the NSCOP report, the NSIRA report, as well as the Hogue report. So having regard for all of that, I think it is necessary that this committee meet over the summer. 5 meetings. I think that's a very reasonable compromise to try to get some of the work around foreign interference done so that we can move on in the fall to deal with government legislation, as well as the private members' motion and private members' bill that we must review.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. The speaking order to begin debate on Mr. Cooper's motion is as follows. Should you want your name added to the list, simply let me know. Mr. Garrettson, followed by Ms. Matheson, followed by Mr. Jennis. Mr. Garrettson, the floor is yours.
Well, first to our witnesses, I just want to thank you for being here today. And I can only imagine the frustration of repeating the same thing over and over and over to be met by a complete stonewall from my 4 Conservative colleagues who are just unwilling to accept or listen to what the witnesses have been telling us today repeatedly. There is just so much desire from my Conservative colleagues to make this as hyper-partisan as possible. They're not interested in actually dealing with the issue of foreign interference, despite the fact that it is an extremely serious issue that needs to be dealt with seriously. They're interested in political gain. Mr. Cooper, I'll tell you what's going on here. Mr. Cooper wants us to vote against this so he can walk out and film a video and put it out there on social media. Oh, Mr. Jennis will help him do that. I'm sure they'll film videos of each other so that they can then go, Mr. Chair, and try to fundraise off this by saying cover up and all this stuff. Meanwhile, I mean, if you had just walked into this room, Mr. Chair, and not known where you were going and just happened to sit in the back of this room and just listen to the exchanges that are going on here today, the average layperson, completely unbiased to any of this, completely uninformed, would probably leave here completely bewildered at the fact that Conservatives are just unwilling to listen to a single word that the witnesses they call before the committee have offered. Madame Drain made an extremely a good observation early on in her second half of this discussion today. She talked about this is not partisan. This is about Canadian democracy. This is about upholding the institutions that we have. And Mr. Cooper just wants to take more and more pot shots at the Prime Minister over this because he sees political opportunity of this. You know, Mr. Cooper just moments ago, when talking about this, talked about a private member's bill.
Point of order, Chair.
Am I Mr.
Gerritsen,
skin a little bit there?
Sorry, Mr. Colleagues, we had a really good 95 minutes or so. Or
I know, I sat through it all.
And we are...
interrupting you.
Guys, we have a point of order from Mr. Genis. I'm going to give him the floor to speak to that point of order. Following that, I'm going to return... Mark, Mr. Gerritsen, please. Thank you. I'm going to afford Mr. Genis the opportunity for his point of order. I'll go back to Mr. Gerritsen. Colleagues, I hope we can be productive in the next number of minutes. So, Mr. Genis, the floor is yours.
At risk of violating Napoleon's most famous advice, I will just point out that my colleague is far afield of the topic of the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Genis, for your observation. Mr. Gerritsen?
So, Mr. Cooper, in his comments, which I found to be wildly ironic, just moments ago, started to talk about a private member's bill introduced by Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff is a Conservative colleague of ours who sits in the House of Commons and actually is only one of a small handful of parliamentarians that sit on the NSICOP committee. Mr. Ruff is Mr. Cooper, Mr. Genius, Mr. Duncan, and Mr. Berthold's connection to security.
Monsieur le Président, j'aurais eu un...
Chair, I've got a point of order, please.
Mr. Gerritsen, we have a point of order. Madame Gill, à vous.
Over to you, Madam Gill. Simply, well, as I'm stepping in for Madame Goudreau, if you can hear me, I've stepped in to replace Madame Goudreau, and I wanted to check that you've seen that my hand was raised before the intervention and the point of order from Mr. Genis. So I would like to follow on after Mr. Gerritsen, but of course, quite politely, I'd like to let him finish his intervention, but I just wanted to make sure that you'd seen that I'd raised my hand to speak briefly as well. Yes, I very much appreciate your comments, and I'll add your name to the list. Thank you.
The floor remains yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I was saying, Mr. Ruff, and I'm speaking directly to the comments of the Conservative member who introduced this motion, who referenced his private member's bill. Mr. Ruff is one of only a small handful of parliamentarians that sit on NSICOP. And for those that might just randomly be tuning into this, NSICOP is the secret committee of parliamentarians that reviews sensitive information, that has all the security clearances to do that. Mr. Ruff does not support the narrative of these conservative colleagues sitting here, despite the fact that Mr. Cooper invoked his name moments ago. As a matter of fact, this is what Mr. Ruff said just a few days ago on June the 10th. He said, every single parliamentarian, in fact, I would encourage every single Canadian, read the report from start to finish. The fact is that an issue that needs to be resolved, referring to foreign interference, and this is the important part, Mr. Chair. You want to tone down the partisanship and up your game on national security intelligence. We all need to do a better job of educating ourselves on what the threats are, what the vulnerabilities are, and how to deal with them going forward. Mr. Ruff also said, he said, quote, to build on what Mr. McGuinty said, I am 100% in agreement. I notice my Conservative colleagues are chatting with each other, which doesn't surprise me because that's what they did during the time that the witnesses were speaking because they have no interest in hearing this. But at least for having it on the record, I just want to reiterate this point. He said, and I am 100% in agreement. The Prime Minister is not redacting anything. It's the process that we go through that allows those redactions to occur to protect national security, national defense, and mainly international relationships. Mr. Ruff, who is on NSICOP, who is a Conservative member of Parliament, is chastising these four individuals for the way that they're acting today. Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn the debate.
Okay, colleagues.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order. Is this member trying to shut down debate
Mr.
when
Janus,
others haven't even been able to reply because he doesn't want to have to work this summer? Is that what's happening, Chair?
Mr. Janus. I think I have your name right. We have a motion that has been
Mr. Garrison
put
just
forward,
say boo-hoo, get over it again.
And we have, guys, do I have to suspend? Or can I just get to the order of business here? I'm not tending to the point of order because we have had a motion to adjourn. You know very well that that is what we call a dilatory motion. We're going to go to a vote. Mr. Clerk, I'm going to ask you to call the vote to adjourn debate on the motion that was moved, what seems like ages ago now, by Mr. Cooper. Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Romanato.
Oui.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Mr. Duguid.
Yes.
Monsieur Lauzon.
Oui.
Mr. Gerritsen. Yes. Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Jennings.
No.
Mr. Duncan.
Nope.
Mr. Berthold.
No.
Madame Gill.
Oui.
Ms. Matheson. 7 yeas, 4 nays.
There we go. Okay, colleagues, you've heard the results. We have adjourned debate on the motion. We are now going to resume the line of questioning that we were engaged in prior to the moving of Mr. Cooper's motion. Mr. Gerritsen, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, should you want your time.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerritsen. Madame Gill, il y avait
Madame Gill, there was another 30 seconds that I had given to Madame Goudreau, so if you want, you have 3 minutes, but if you don't, you have 2 minutes 30. I'll simply put a question to her and we'll see. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'd like to apologize to the witnesses in front of us. There we were talking about business committee. We could have done that later, so my excuses. Now I've got a question to put to Madame Xavier about those who were victims of the ATP 31 attack. Last week we were told that neither CSIS nor the CSE or the RCMP had contacted MPs. Following on from those incidents or disclosure in the press, and the only briefing given to the MPs came from the FBI. Now, that it's enormous. It's really not normal. Do you think this is abnormal, not normal? And what about this lack of communication with MPs? Is that part of your protocol or non-protocol, rather? So could you perhaps field this two-pronged question? Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pity, in fact, that the MPs concerned were not contacted. because we thought that by providing information in 2021 to the House of Commons that the necessary steps would be taken to inform you. Having said that, we are taking necessary steps to inform our colleagues within the agencies and also in the House to improve the processes. And I said earlier, we've had several conversations already with our colleagues to improve things and make sure that you're better served. I'd like to add something. No, I'm trying to see if I've got enough time so I can put another question afterwards. And then perhaps you could also send these in writing because, of course, I don't have much time. I was also surprised to learn, Madame Xavier and Madame Drouin, perhaps you can both field this next question, but I've been an MP since 2015 and we've been told that, in fact, there's a centre against cyber attacks that could support MPs when this type of attack arises. But now, that was back in 2015. We're in 2024, so 9-10 years as an MP, and I've never known that this type of centre existed. So why have I never even been told? Why have we not been informed about the type of support that could be available to us when this type of attack occurs? Thank you very much for that question. I'd like to add that before the 2019 election, there were already services that were offered, in particular during the general election period during 2019. Because of everything we'd learned from other elections around the world, we wanted to make sure that candidates in particular who were going to be nominated and become future MPs. Well, my question was to know why we were not told about this. It's great to know that it exists, but in fact, we didn't know it existed. And if we don't know it exists, how could it help us? So that was my question. Why were we not told about this? Who should have told us about this? And how should they have told us about this? Because I've been here for nearly 10 years and I've just learned about this very recently. Thank you, Madame Gill. I've applied the 30 seconds extra that are given to Madame Gaudreau. But Madame Xavier, if you want to quickly respond. Response. Well, back then, we had shared that information with all of the caucuses and all the election officers so that they could share that with the members. Of course, we can continue to improve communication with everyone to make sure that the correct services for support can be offered.
Minutes, 30 seconds. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. And I do want to thank the witnesses as well for appearing. And I will apologize in advance. While your time is very valuable, I do want to make sure that I'm able to move a motion that I've had on notice for quite some time. So with my time left standing, I would like to move the following motion that I gave notice of previously. And that may require a bit of changes due to timing. However, given the recent findings of the NSCOP Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's democratic processes and institutions, the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs ordered the production of all relevant memoranda, briefing notes, emails, records of conversations, and any other relevant documents from departments and agencies, including the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and Communications Security Establishment Canada, concerning interactions with Conservative Party of Canada officials and representatives on the topic of foreign interference and its impact on the outcome of the 2020-2022 leadership races, provided that, one, both agencies tasked with gathering these documents apply redactions according to the Access of Information and Privacy Act. Two, these redacted documents be deposited as soon as possible, but not later than Sunday, June 25th, with the clerk of the committee to be distributed to all members of the committee in both official languages. And if I may speak to my motion. Okay, I may speak to my motion. So I recognize I had put forward this motion earlier on June 11th, and so I recognize that there may be a willingness to change the point 2 in terms of the date to provide authorities with more time on providing and the provision of the documents requested. But I think that it's extremely important, considering we've all sat around this table, we've all talked about how incredibly important foreign interference is in terms of how it impacts not only this institution, but those who come into this institution, those who us as leaders, but are the leaders that we work with in all the given parties. I think that it's important as part of that uncovery and that investigation. And I know that I'm sure my Conservative colleagues will agree, considering their passion on this issue in terms of foreign interference and wanting to get to the bottom of it, that they too, despite their leaders' unwillingness to get the briefing and the security clearance, which I think is a mistake, but what have you, that they would want to get to the bottom of this. And in all the conversations that we've had, they've been very clear about how intent they are to get at the bottom of this. So I think that it's fair, considering my concerns around the Anzacop report, that we move forward. And I would also like to note that we were very clear that we abide by privacy legislation, that we ensure that the appropriate redactions are applied to respect that privacy. But I think that it's important to go through this and pass this motion as I've put it forward.
Okay, colleagues, so a couple of things. The first is I'm going to let the witnesses go if I have the blessing of the committee, because we have exhausted the amount of time we have set forward for that, and they have provided their services. I'm not sure we need them here for the business that we're about to undertake. So I'm looking around. I think I have consent. Madame Xavier, Madame Drouin, thank you very much for being with us. We wish you a good summer, and we'll look forward to reconnecting at some point in the future. Colleagues, just give me 1 minute. I just need to check in with the clerk on something, okay? Okay, colleagues, so here's where we're at. Ms. Matheson has moved her motion. We have to deal with that motion. However, and I've asked for additional resources in order for us to be able to deal with that motion. However, the current resources that were provided to us have now run out. So I need to suspend briefly in order for the clerk and the staff here to turn over the resources, at which point we will resume. And the speaking list to address Ms. Matheson's motion as it currently stands is Mr. Cooper. If there are other members, of course, let me know. So I'm going to suspend, let the resources turn over. We will resume debate on the motion with Mr. Cooper being the first speaker.